Hey, this is another attempt. I was almost done with the last one, but then I messed up. So here we go again. Large biological molecules. This just means macromolecules. Anything that more than one monomer or more than one piece of something is hooked together is a macro, large molecule. That's it. That's all this is referring to. Um, there are four different types of macromolecules: carbohydrates, which you know of from food. That's your breads, your pasta, anything sugary. Most fruits, especially if they're sweet, have lots of fructose, which is a monomer for carbohydrates. Um, any of those are all considered carbohydrates and are really important to energy. As a young adult, you all need lots of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates give you the energy it takes for you to get through your day. Lipids are fats. Fats carry the most amount of energy of all of those four categories of macromolecules. So fats have the most per gram, the most amount of calories. That's why you should have your lipids, or your fats should be one of the smallest categories of what you eat on a daily basis. Proteins all have nitrogen as their base and make up all of the, I think it's 60% of the dry weight of a cell is protein. So it's all the organelles in a cell, it's your muscles, it's all the hormones in your body, it's your blood. Virtually anything that's been made in your body is a protein. And then nucleic acids, which is DNA and RNA, and we're going to go into that into more detail. We'll go into a little bit at the end of this, but also in another chapter. So for right now, I'm going to do a section on carbohydrates and lipids. I'll do proteins separate, proteins and a little bit on nucleic acids. So this is a protein folding software program. Obviously, those computers are brand new. Those are the 2019 versions. We go backwards and make them really big now. I have this software program, and you guys will be able to do some protein folding. It's pretty fun, and it actually is something. There are so many different ways that proteins can fold that they ask the public to go through and try this software, because you might be able to find a way just randomly that a protein can fold that a scientist hasn't been able to find in a lab, which is pretty cool. So the basics for all of these, and the easiest way for vocab, as you guys learned from the 100 words in the summer assignment, break down a word, break it down into parts to figure out what it means. And even if you don't know what it means, this will let you know. So poly meaning many, polymer parts, there are many parts. And this is what's going to happen when you put a bunch of mono meaning single parts, a bunch of single parts together. This is where you're going to end up with the polymers. So there are different ways that we can put them together. And of course, based on what they are, that will end up making the polymer something different. A bunch of sugars put together will always be a carbohydrate. So that's going to tell you that that's what you end up making. Just like a recipe, there is a recipe for all of the polymers, and based on what you put in it, it's going to come up with a different end result, I guess. So, two different ways that we can bring these together to make them or break them apart. Let's do the first one. So dehydration reaction. This is going to mean we're going to dehydrate something. So we're going to take water out of it. When we take the water out of it, because of the empty electron space that's left, when we take this hydrogen out of here, it's going to leave a space right there that is going to want an electron to fill it in. Hydrogen's a +1 or a -1, and it's going to say, well, I need something to fill this in. If you've had physics, you know that all energy wants to be in a balanced state. If it's not balanced, If there is an extra charge on one side that there isn't on the other, then that makes it an unstable substance. So where the hydrogen comes off, and this is a hydroxyl group, where the hydroxyl comes off, both of these coming off of the monomer that they're attached to, when they come off, they leave this deficit of charge. And now this is not balanced. And because their proximities to each other, when they're not balanced, these two are going to want to attract to each other anyway. So you're going to get this coming together on its own because they're not balanced. These aren't balanced. Once this water leaves, that's going to make monomer 3, or in this case, short polymer 3 and monomer number 4 are going to want to come together because that satisfies that energy deficit. So that makes it so that 3 and 4 are balanced now, and that's exactly what we want. We don't want to have any extra charge or a need of charge. We want them to be balanced. And by hooking them together now, we know that this is balanced, and we just made a longer polymer. So if your body needs to make some proteins, then it can actually go through, and by pulling water out of these two different pieces, we can actually make a protein. You can actually make all but 8 of the essential proteins that you need in your body. Out of 8 of the 20, you can actually make this protein in your body. You can also make a carbohydrate. You can make any of these. You can't make a carbohydrate. If you did that, then you wouldn't have to eat. So there you go. That's a misnomer right there. So this is dehydration. Always when you pull one off, when you pull the hydrogen off, you end up with these 2 blank spots. If there was no hydroxyl or hydrogen there would be an energy deficit. These two, by binding together, they fix that and they become stable. If we want to break them apart, we're going to use hydrolysis. So by using hydrolysis, we're actually going to add water to this longer polymer right here. So we have this longer polymer. We're going to add water to it. And when we add water to it, that water, because of its polarity, is going to actually then, the hydrogen is going to attach to this side, which makes it satisfied. And the hydroxyl, which is left over from the water, is going to attach to this single monomer. And you're going to end up with being able to break apart this larger molecule. Now, why would you want to break apart a larger molecule in your body? Because the whole thing is to build you up. So where in the body would you want to break it down? This is like Dora the Explorer. That's right, in your digestive tract. Good job, camper. I've never seen Dora, but I know it's something like that. So anyway, this by adding water in, we can now break it apart. We can add more water, break apart 2 and 3, add more water and break apart 1 and 2. This would be whatever you just ate for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. This is whatever you just ate. We need to break it apart so that we can get the energy from the bonds that are between it, which is what it takes to feed you, to keep you nourished, and to give you energy. If you can't break them apart, this piece of food is useless to you. This would be, if we couldn't break it apart, this would be just like iceberg lettuce. Iceberg lettuce, we can't break apart. And I'll talk to you in a minute why not. We can't break it apart. If we couldn't break it apart, it just goes straight through the body as fiber and doesn't do anything for us. So we need water. This is also why if you're on a diet, and you shouldn't be as a young person, you should be taking food in. If you are on a diet, the first thing they tell you is drink more water. Can we see why? It'll help you break all the food down that you're eating, help you get more energy from what you're eating, and then you don't need to eat as much. We eat a lot of food that we don't use, and that comes out as waste. That's your feces that's coming out that the body couldn't break down. It either couldn't break it down or it didn't have the time to break it down, and therefore it's wasted and it just comes out the body. If you eat a bunch of junk food one day, you'll notice that your amount of waste will increase. That's because your body just can't break all that down. Sometimes it'll put it into fat and put it on your body. A lot of times it just kicks it outside the body itself. So hydrolysis is adding water. We're adding we're adding water to it, and we're going to use that to break apart these. And then we're going to use dehydration by pulling a water out of it in order to bind them together. This is you building up muscle. So you need to build muscle. You need to build anything in your body, any protein, that's going to do it. And this is going to break it apart. Okay? This is silly. So the first of these categories is carbohydrates. So the carbohydrates, which are sugars, simple sugars, which would be like what's in a can of Dr. Pepper. Those are simple sugars. They're so simple, you really don't need to break them down. If you need to break them down at all, it would be the amylase, or the which is the enzyme in the saliva in your mouth, and that would break it down. It goes into your stomach. It's already a liquid, digests and goes straight to the bloodstream. You have a sugar high for 30 minutes. The body doesn't have to do much to it. It's already a monosaccharide. It's already a simple little sugar, and your body can use it instantly. And it does for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then there's no more left. And so then your energy levels drop, and you had that sugar high that you got after drinking a soda. If it's a solid, it might take a little bit longer, but if it's all sugar, like a candy bar or, Skittles, I don't know, I can't think of a candy, then it'll happen the same way. It just takes it a little bit longer because now the stomach has to physically break it down into the small sugars, and then it goes to the bloodstream and does the same thing as like the Dr. Pepper would. So these carbohydrates, these are going to be starches, potatoes, these are going to be breads, these are going to be muffins, bagels, pasta, rice, any of the starches where they're able to bind together and put a bunch of energy into a single molecule. That's what a starch is for. A potato grows underground and just gathers all the sugars from that plant that it's making from the sun and hangs on to them. And pretty soon we go and pull it out of the ground. There's this huge clump of sugar, which is now turned into starch because it was linked together. And now we eat that as a potato as part of our diet. Put it in our mouth and in our bodies, and we break it down again into the small sugars so we can use it for energy. So monosaccharides, those are the ones that are simple. And the formula for all carbohydrates is CHO. So CH2O. So that's just how you remember what a carbohydrate. CH2O is any multiple of this. So if you're glucose, you're C6H12O6. You can be C12H24O12. As long as you're following a multiple of the same number of oxygens and carbons and twice as many hydrogens, it tells you it's a saccharide. It might be a polysaccharide because it has multiples of that, but it is a small group that is going to be attached to other sugars so that you can combine them together to make bigger sugars. So if you guys have had chemistry, you know that a functional group, I hope this has gone over in chemistry, a functional group is anything attached to the basic. So if this is the basic, anything else we attach to it, chemically attach and bond to it, is called the functional group. This would be the group carrying it, but the functional group is over here and would be attached to the side, and that would tell you that it is specific to the liver or specific to the skin or whatever it happens to be, in a plant maybe. So we look at the basics. These are the basics. You can draw them like this, where they are a chain of carbons. So penta is 5. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 carbons. A triose is 3 carbons. And each chemical on here, so each of these, what they're showing you here is that this, the highlighted group is a carboxyl group, I think. Carboxyl, yeah. So this is a carboxyl group, and it has, depending on where it is, it can actually change what the chemical is. So up here, in these up here that are aldoses, these are the carboxyl is all off of the first carbon. In here, they're all off of carbon number 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Regardless of how many carbons there are, all of these guys have this functional unit off of the second carbon. And that's what makes them ketose. So real life connection here. What is a ketose? A ketose is, if you've seen ketosis in commercials on TV about diabetes. If you have diabetes, ketose is what is made from your body actually burning up proteins. So you don't want to have that. You don't want to have this type of sugar in your urine, because that means that you've gotten to the point where it's burning up proteins. This is what it takes from that protein, puts it together, and this can come out in your urine. If that does, that's a bad sign for someone with diabetes, and they might have to go get their dosages of insulin changed because they may not be getting enough insulin. So this is one way of writing the carbohydrate chains. Keep in mind, the carbons have numbers based on which one is first, second, third, fourth, fifth, etc., all the way down. And some of these, when we get to fats, will go down to like C24, and you'll have 24 carbohydrates in a row. So this is what we just covered. And here's fructose. So fructose is the same. Let's look up here. So now we have C6H12O6, but it's a different formula than glucose. I mean, same formula as glucose, but look where glucose has this functional group and this functional group versus fructose, which only has it right here and up top. So this is just changing where that functional group is. And by changing the functional group, here's fructose and glucose, galactose is another one. By changing where it's at, it actually changes the function of the whole molecule. Ribose, ribonucleic acid, is the sugar that's in RNA. Okay, so let's move on. So sometimes that's one way to draw them as that linear skeleton. Sometimes they draw them as circles. So because they aren't just flat. So this is kind of the way it looks like. And some of them are. Generally, they're going to look like this if they are a fat. So some of them are actually rings, and they come in a ring form. When they come in a ring form, they draw them like this, which is a little bit different. So there's your linear forms, and there's your ring forms. When you're looking at a ring, I'm going to go back and show you this one because it's bigger. They're going to number them. So when you're looking at this ring, if you look at this, what actually is each of these points? It's a carbon. On this one, this happens to be an oxygen. But each of these is a carbon. So they would number them as carbon 1, carbon 2, carbon 3, carbon 4, carbon 5. If you look on here, carbon 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And on here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So they're all carbons all the way down. Hi, kitty. Hi. They're carbons all the way around, and based on where they're at, they have a number, and that's important. You need to know that. Seems silly, but it's actually really important. So on this type, if you look at this one, see how it's got this black kind of a thicker edge? All that's showing you is that where you see that thick edge, that's just saying